of the Rock Prospect Podcast. I'm Amy Nixon. That's Michael Ween. We want to thank you for joining us here tonight on a Thursday evening. We're recording this just after Mets Brewers has gone final. The Mets are moving on to the NLDS to play the Philadelphia Phillies. And we're going to get into all the baseball tonight. We're going to be previewing the NLDS and the ALDS series. And to start the show, since I am a Cowboys fan, he is a Steelers fan, we're going to be getting into that Sunday Night Football game, kind of previewing that game, and we're going to give y'all a prize pick slip that you can tail or fade if you're into that. But once again, if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. We make a bunch of different content, and we're actually planning on making a few changes here so we can give you all the best quality we can. And we're excited for y'all to be able to see those here in the future. We're not going to announce them just yet, but let's go ahead and get into this thing. Michael, how are you doing tonight?
Man, just when you think the New York Mets are dead, they put together a rally that defies logic. You have the Francisco Lindor walk against one of the best closers in baseball, leading off for the Mets in a world that Shohei Ohtani doesn't exist. He's winning the National League MVP for what he's meant to the New York Mets this season. Brandon Nimmo on a 2-strike count shoots the ball through the gap, gets Francisco Lindor to third with one out. You have first and third with one out. Pete Alonso's coming to the plate. He struggled all series long. And what does he do? He just puts bat on the ball. It flies out into right center. It scrapes the wall. And it goes out. And it gives the Mets a 3-2 lead. They would eventually scratch another run across with a Starling Marte RBI single. What a goddamn game tonight in an elimination game. And what a comeback by the New York Mets. Have to give them credit. And now both 6 seeds in the MLB playoffs are moving on in each league respectively. The Detroit Tigers, what a story that is. We'll talk about that later. And the New York Mets, another great story. Moving on to face their division rival in the NLDS. And 3 out of the 4 DS series this year are division rival series, meaning we get an NL East, NLDS between the Mets and the Phillies, big-time rivals. We get the Padres taking on the Dodgers, a team in the Padres that's actually knocked out the Dodgers 2 out of the last 3 seasons. That's a big rivalry. And then in the American League, we get the Tigers, the upstart Tigers, taking on the team that has mostly owned the division over the last half-decade in the Cleveland Guardians. So baseball's already had a fantastic stretch of 3 days in the wild card round, and I can't wait to break down the good and the bad from the wild card round, and then talk about those series. But first, we have business to handle, and we got to get into the Cowboys and the Steelers. Our 2 teams are meeting again for the first time in 4 years. They met back in 2016 in Pittsburgh in a game that was fantastic. I still remember it to this day. You had the Ben Roethlisberger fake spike to Antonio Brown on the fade route with like 45 seconds to go. That was like Marino-like to take the lead, and then eventually Ezekiel Elliott and company went down the field and won the game. And then back in 2020, in the COVID year, where the Steelers were 7-0 going into the game in a year in which they started the year 11-0 before kind of falling off down the stretch and losing to, forget who they lost to. I think it was Cleveland that year in the playoffs. They came back and they won that game in Dallas. So there's been 2 already really good games, and now we're here in week 5 for a Sunday night matchup. So let's go ahead and jump right into each team.
Yeah. The first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to kind of talk about, I guess, the long-term outlook and the short-term outlook of both of these teams. And I'm going to start with my Cowboys, and then Michael's going to give his opinions on the Cowboys, and we're just kind of go back and forth, and we'll do the same thing for the Steelers. So, first things first, I think from a short-term standpoint, the number one thing right now is we got to make sure that we kind of hang around 500 right now. That's kind of where I'm at, because this is not. I don't think this is going to be some like world beater division this year. And as long as you're kind of hanging around 500, come November, December, there's a chance that you could kind of find your stride. That's the short-term outlook. That's kind of looking at things from an optimistic perspective. Now, the pessimistic perspective, however, is probably I guess, more so my view of things. It's just right now how the Cowboys are playing. I mean, to put it simply, we are a very middling team right now, very mediocre, not horrible, but not good. And based on the star power that you have along this roster, based on the contracts that you have on this roster, particularly with Dak, but that's another conversation that I'm not going to dive into. That'll take too long. And then, of course, the coaching situation. I think for Dallas right now, it's mostly just the cycle is just kind of continuing on. Like every single time the Cowboys have had I guess, championship window, and I say that in quotes because we haven't actually made the conference title game. Jerry pays all of his stars, and then the team starts lacking in depth because he paid all of his stars, and then the cycle continues again. And this is one of those years where we're starting to lack in depth, and I think this might be the start of a little bit of a downturn. But I'm confident in our front office to be able to draft well and kind of get us back up there come 2026, 27.
What is from an on-field standpoint, what is the number one biggest issue with the Dallas Cowboys right now, in your opinion? From an on-field play standpoint.
I would just say lack of size in the middle of our defense.
Okay.
Not even just D tackles. Everyone wants to focus on Mozzie Smith, and he was a first-round pick that hasn't worked out thus far. But beyond that, you look at the linebackers, DeMarvion Overshown. As much as I like him as a player, former Longhorn, he's played pretty well, but at the end of the day, he's a safety turn linebacker, and he has a ceiling in how good he can be as a run defender because he's a little bit light, and that's a common theme throughout this linebacking group, and even in the secondary as well. We've prioritized speed over size, and come December and January when you got to play big boy football and play against the teams that can run the ball, which is the playoff teams usually, that's when we kind of get exposed. And that's when we're going to be exposed if we get there.
The reason I asked you that question is because it plays right into the point I wanted to make. When I watch the Dallas Cowboys, my biggest concern is losing time of possession because the run defense struggles, because of the lack of size and the lack of beef on the interior of the defense. when you look at the Cowboys' defense against running backs this season so far, smallish sample size, it's only 4 games, but they're giving up 4.5 plus yards per carry. That's 22nd in the league. 1.8, almost 2 yards before contact per rush. That's 27th in the league. Opposing running backs have a 30% first down rate on runs. So on 30% of the runs that running backs are getting against the Cowboys, they're picking up a first down. That's 30th in the NFL. And then the Cowboys have a 12% stuff rate, which is last in the NFL. All those stats according to Warren Sharp. So when I look at the Cowboys for right now, that is my biggest concern, along with, I guess, just kind of the offensive line. There's a lot of youth. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's some youth on the offensive line, especially at the tackle positions. And going up against a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, who will be without Alex Highsmith, but still have Nick Herbig, who's very explosive off the edge, and TJ Watt, one of the best to do it in this generation. That could be worrisome, especially when you get the Pittsburgh crowd going. I think a key in this game, I think whatever team takes a lead early is going to have a huge advantage over the other team, just because I feel like, especially if it's Pittsburgh, because then you force Dallas to throw. They're without Brandon Cooks. I feel like I'm hoping that Pittsburgh and Mike Tomlin will come up with a plan to double or maybe even triple team CeeDee Lamb, make sure he doesn't win this game by himself. That would be an ideal for either team, taking a lead early. But in terms of the Cowboys in the short term, I feel like, and it's kind of the same from a Pittsburgh standpoint, which I'll explain, getting your key players healthy and hanging either right around 500 or maybe a little above 500 is really important right now. It's a little different for Pittsburgh, but there's key injuries that you'd hate to have right now. Obviously, you'd love to have Micah Parsons in this game. You'd love to have DeMarcus Lawrence in this game. You'd love to have Brandon Cooks. But I feel like on both sides, there's some symmetry in the way that these teams look right now with all the injuries that have already gone down.
Yeah, and you mentioned like tripling and doubling CeeDee Lamb. I mean, that's going to be a common theme this season. And, you know, I would love to sit here and criticize Mike McCarthy, but that's on the front office. You know, I've kind of changed my whole Mike McCarthy sucks tune since this point last season. I was kind of on that bandwagon. But he proved me wrong last year with how he coached this team. I think he's an okay coach. I just don't think he's a good or great coach. I don't think you're winning a Super Bowl with Mike McCarthy in 2024. But that's besides my point. My point being, this front office didn't make moves this offseason. They had the ability to do so, and they didn't. Like, they had the ability to get Micah Parsons under contract before the season started and kind of remove that, I guess, cloud hanging above this organization's head. Even though Michael Parsons didn't hold out, that doesn't matter. It's still something that's on the minds of all the players and messes with morale as well. And then Dak Prescott, you sign him 3 hours before the season starts. Like, you want your players to be able to focus on the game, and you have all this drama that you create. I don't like that approach.
Yeah. From a Steelers standpoint, can we transition now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and transition. 15 minutes is a good mark, for sure.
I think in the short term, number one, the Steelers need to focus on getting some of these key contributors back healthy as soon as possible. The main ones being Jalen Warren, who's dealing with, I think it's a hamstring or calf. So Najee Harris is going to have to shoulder more of the load. The reason a lot of Steelers fans were excited about the backfield going back to the end of last year was because you had the 1-2 punch of Jalen Warren and Najee Harris, who have two different skill sets.
Right.
Najee Harris, though, going into this game with Cordell Patterson now out with an injury, is going to have to be the guy. If he wants to get any kind of contract this offseason, which he probably will anyways, but I don't think it'll be from Pittsburgh, he's going to have to show up in a game like this. And then obviously Alex Highsmith on the defensive side of the football. Like, he's one of the best number 2 edge rushers in the NFL, in my opinion. He's been really good for the past couple years. He's out right now with a groin injury. Reports are saying the target date is the October 20th game against the Jets, which is another Sunday night game, to get him back. So that'll be 2 weeks from this, when this game will take place, which is fine. But if you're the Steelers, you got to get some of your key guys back. But you've done a good job putting yourself in a position to where you can wait a little while longer to get them back. If you were 1-3 right now, it'd be a whole different story. But since you're 3-1 and you've put yourself, and you could have been 4-0, and you put yourself in a good position, for the most part, aside from last Sunday, you're playing good complementary team football to start this season. You put yourself in a position where you can afford to let these guys kind of get healthy for an extra week or two. In the short term, I have belief in this Steelers team. It wasn't a good performance last Sunday, but they still, from an offensive standpoint in the second half, showed up, and they had a drive to win that game. It's just been the little mistakes here and there on the offensive side of the football, on the offensive line with untimely penalties, bad snaps, miscommunications between Zach Frazier and Justin Fields, which just can't happen. And then a couple turnovers in that game really hurt the Steelers. But one of them wasn't even Justin Fields' fault. But when you look at this schedule, going into the bye week, which will be week 9, you get Cowboys at home, winnable game. It could go either way, but it's a winnable game. You go on the road next week to Vegas, tough place to play, but that's a winnable game if you play Steelers football. Then you bring in the Jets on Sunday Night Football. That'll be a tough game, but it's a winnable game. At home on Sunday night with a defense. And then you get a long week, Monday Night Football, at home against Daniel Jones going into your bye week. Like, if we can go, even if we go 2-2 over the next 4 games, but ideally go 3-1 going into the bye week like we just did, which I think is very doable if we play complimentary football and we get some of our key contributors healthy. That should be the focus for this Steelers team in the short term, because after the bye week, things really heat up. All 6 divisional games in the AFC North are after the bye week in the last 8-9 weeks of the season. And then you also have to play Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. It's probably the toughest schedule in the league during the second half of the season. So, and I know the Browns aren't great right now, but those will still be tough divisional games. I know the Bengals don't look great right now. Not probably how we thought they would look in the beginning of the season, but those are still divisional games. So that's the focus right now in the short term for the Steelers. It's get to your bye week at 5-3 minimum, but 6-2 would be awesome. 6-2 would be awesome, and I think it's very doable. And then long term, it's all about what happens at quarterback. It's about, does Justin Fields really take this quarterback job by the neck and hold on to it going into next year? Does he get that 2-year, $50 million extension at some point? Do the Steelers give in and give him that? That's a very affordable contract for a solid quarterback in today's NFL. And if he continues to play the solid football he's been playing, I do believe the way that this locker room has bought into Justin Fields, the way that he leads this football team, I do believe the way that Tomlin talks about Justin Fields, I just believe that the Steelers would end up giving him that, and maybe Russell Wilson becomes some kind of trade chip at the trade deadline for a team that is in need of a quarterback going down the stretch. So that's where my head's at with the Steelers. Just get to the bye week 5-3, 6-2. That would be awesome.
Yeah, honestly, my take on the Steelers, it pretty much aligns with yours. But get as much of a hold on this division as you possibly can. And honestly, if I'm the Steelers, I'm rooting for the Bengals to beat the Ravens this week, and kind of even those two out at 2-3, and then if you take care of business, win this game, all of a sudden you're at 4-1, and you have, what would that be, a 2-game lead. All of a sudden,
2.5 game lead,
which would be 2.5 games, right? And that would be very significant for sure. Honestly, Justin Fields has really impressed me so far this season. That second half against the Colts, outside of the final drive, and that's just an execution thing between him and the center. That second half was the best half of football I've ever seen him play. They opened up the offense, and I thought he handled that beautifully. He was making good decisions. He was getting the ball out, running when necessary. And it just seemed like, well, for me at least, that was the first time I've seen him in the NFL just be kind of in the flow state. It feels like every other time I've watched him, it's been, he's thinking instead of playing football. You know, that game he was playing football in that second half. He was flowing, and that to me is a sign of, is a really good sign that Pittsburgh's coaching is making an impact. And I also think one of the key factors for Pittsburgh that we said before the season was Arthur Smith, and he's done a really good job. So I do still think they want to get the run game going, and I think that will come. But it's been really, really positive for the Steelers so far this year, and I think they're gonna be right there come November, December for this division.
Yeah, I think with Justin Fields, the last 2 weeks in the second half, probably the two best halves of football I've seen him play since he's been in the NFL. And they're two significant halves of football. Early on in the season, games that you want to be able to win to kind of pad your record in September. The game against the Chargers, just a dot across the middle to Calvin Austin in a tight window to extend the lead in that game. The anticipation that he threw that ball with, I haven't seen that much from Justin Fields in his career. He's starting to use the middle of the field more, and the past 2 weeks especially, he's not taking off to run at the first sign of trouble. He's a couple times so far in the last couple weeks gotten out of the pocket, extended the play, and made completions down the field, which I love to see. Now, hopefully that can continue, and that gets better throughout the season. Because if it does, Colin Cowherd was talking about this earlier on his show, and I disagree with a lot of the stuff that Colin says nowadays, but I think he was right about this. Where you absolutely want to be in the NFL is to have a superstar quarterback, to have a Patrick Mahomes, to have a Josh Allen, to have one of the 6 or 7 guys that you probably call like cut above the rest, right? We all know who those guys are. But if you're not able to get one of those guys, one of the game changers, right? You just want to have a B quarterback, B plus quarterback that can win you football games, get you in the playoffs, and give you a chance, right? That you're not having to pay $40+ million. That's not cost prohibitive, right?
Yeah.
A Baker Mayfield, for example, right? That's where you want to be.
Yeah.
Perfect example. A Sam Darnold. Yeah, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold. I know it's only been 4 weeks with Sam Darnold, but like the way that he's playing, they're not paying him anything when it comes to how much quarterbacks get paid nowadays. Like those kinds of guys, that's exactly where you want to be as a team in the NFL if you're not able to get the top line guy. Because it's hard to find those guys. I agree with Colin on that. And I think if Justin Fields can continue to play this way, if he can give us B football, control time of possession, and let the defense, for the most part, like feast, the Steelers will win a lot of games this year. Mike Tomlin will probably finish above 500 once again, and they'll be in the playoffs. How far do they go in the playoffs will probably have to depend on, number one, can this offensive line gel and really get the run game going? And number two, can Justin Fields have a game where he just elevates to another level? That would be what they would probably have to do to win a wild card game. I don't know that they go much further than that, but if this defense can keep them in the game, you never know. So I'm not getting that far ahead of myself, but just from a long-term standpoint, that's kind of what Steelers fans are hoping for, is we can get into a situation where we have a young, athletic quarterback who still we can kind of squeeze everything that we can out of, right? 25 years old. He's younger than the quarterback we had last year. He's younger than Kenny Pickett, believe it or not. And he has all the tools. We just got to, if Arthur Smith can continue on this track of development, and maybe we trade for a receiver, it doesn't even have to be a Devontae Adams or a Amari Cooper. It doesn't have to be a star. It can be like a solid number 2, like a Christian Kirk, if the Jaguars end up selling or something like that. Like, we just need one of those guys. God, if we could just have... I actually think this is my last comment. I actually think the Deontay Johnson swap in the offseason hasn't gone as bad for Pittsburgh as people thought it would, just because Deontay Jackson's been really good as a number 2 corner. And Deontay Johnson's playing well for the Panthers. But if this team had Deontay Johnson right now, like, I think it would be possibly 4-0. So,
and Roman Wilson is yet to play too. That's the other
part. That's the other part. Like, I'm hoping he's going to play either this week or next week. That's the hope.
Right.
All right. So let's go ahead and get into our picks. Do you want to start off, or do you want me to go ahead?
Yeah, you go ahead and start.
I don't want to be biased. I think this is going to be a very close game. But I'm going to take the Steelers to win at home on the back of the defense, 23-20. So I'm going under the total of 44.5. A Chris Boswell game-winning field goal. I think that could happen both ways. I could see it happening with Brandon Aubrey as well.
I'm gonna say Steelers win as well. I'm kind of on your same wavelength. Like, Dallas doesn't have an identity right now, and the Steelers know how they want to win. That's the main thing. Like, both have been, like, I guess, people have been down on them in the offseason, I guess. But the results on the field so far this season, they've been on completely different sides of the spectrum, in my opinion. Like, I just think the Steelers are the better football team. And playing at home, I think TJ Watt's going to eat, Nick Herbert's going to eat, all those pass rushers are going to get after. So I'm going to say Steelers win 23-16.
Okay.
I'm going to go under as well.
Prize picks. Before we move on to baseball, Amy and I together have put together the prize picks bets that we like the most for this game. And you can probably pair them in different ways if you want to. But we're just going to go ahead and tell you and kind of explain our thinking on each of these. So, Emmy has it pulled up here. Or do you? You got prize picks pulled up. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So, for Dallas and Pittsburgh, I think the first one that we like is Justin Fields over 1.5 touchdowns scored, receiving, rushing, or passing. I think he'll probably maybe run for a touchdown and maybe throw for one. I could definitely see that happening. We both like that bet. We also like Pat Freiermuth on receiving yards. I believe he's gone over 3 out of the 4 times this season. He's been a bigger part of this offense under Arthur Smith. We all know how much Arthur Smith tries to involve tight ends in his offense. I think the line right now, unless it's moved since we last spoke, is at 31.5, probably near the bottom. But
yep, here we go.
Fields has done a good job of finding him over the middle of the field. I like the over on that. That's typically 3 or 4 catches for Freiermuth. I think he probably gets 5 or 6 targets in this game. From a Cowboys standpoint, I'll let Emmy explain. I believe we went. Brandon Aubrey made field goals. The question for the Cowboys in this question for the Cowboys in this game is going to be like, you probably move the ball some in between the 20s, but once you get inside the 20s, can you punch it in against this Steelers defense? And probably, even if you do punch it in a couple times, you'll probably end up having to settle also a couple times for field goals. So I like Brandon Aubrey over 1.5 field goals made. And then we were kind of on the fence of what else we would add to this prize pick slip. There are a couple, and I'll let Emmy kind of explain where we went with this.
Yeah, so one we considered was longest reception for George Pickens. He's every single week, it seems like he's due for one down the sideline. That's kind of his specialty, as we know, kind of the contested catches down the sidelines. And against these Dallas corners, really anyone other than Trayvon Diggs, and even against Trayvon Diggs, there's opportunity to be had. With Andrew Booth on the other side from Diggs, with Deron Bland currently out, the matchups there I really like. So that's one we considered, but what was the one we ended up going with? I can't quite remember. Was it receptions?
Well, there are some others that excuse me, that we're still considering. I believe it was fantasy score. The fantasy score bets for this particular game are interesting. If you scroll down near the bottom, there are a couple for this game. I think there's a Dak Prescott one. There's a CeeDee Lamb one. So I was kind of going back and forth between maybe one of these fantasy bets or the George Pickens over 22.5 longest reception. What do you think?
Honestly, I like the under on one of these Dallas players right here.
Okay.
Maybe not Dak, because I do think there's a chance that Dak throws for a lot of yards.
Yep.
But then obviously CeeDee Lamb, that's kind of risky. But Jalen Tolbert, to me, I don't think has been very consistent.
Okay.
He had a decent game against Baltimore in terms of fantasy score, but I don't know. I think this Pittsburgh defense will kind of be able to limit that. Uh, but honestly, I do think the George Pickens bet is probably the better one.
Okay. So we can go with that. And then there are probably some others that we would consider, but ultimately those are the ones that we feel the most confident in, which was kind of the point of this segment.
Yeah,
So,
I think the struggle with a slip like this, where we're going with just this particular game, is picking a Cowboys player. Even for the one we did go with, Brandon Aubrey, the one thing that I would be concerned about is if the Cowboys get behind early,
yeah.
they might be having to go for it on fourth down. So that's like my one concern with this
Yeah.
particular slip. But that would be the only thing that would give me reason for concern.
Okay. Well, anything else on Pittsburgh and Dallas or the NFL this weekend in general before we move on to baseball?
Um. Oh well, I guess just that Thursday night game tonight looked pretty good. I didn't get to watch any of it. I'm probably gonna watch some
Yeah,
of
I'll have
it
to watch
tomorrow
it back.
morning. But yeah, that game looks like last I checked, the score was 27-20 Bucks, and it was the third quarter. So that's it looking like a shootout. Um,
Yeah.
so um, definitely interesting game there. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the baseball. I'm gonna kind of stop
Yeah.
sharing my screen
Uh,
here. There we go.
so what I kind of want to do is I want to go through each division series, talk about keys on both sides, and give our predictions. Remember, in the baseball playoffs, wild card is a series of 3 games. The DS is a series of 5 games. So each team theoretically would have a rotation of 3 starting pitchers for the DS. And then the CS, the championship series, is 7 games, along with the World Series, where starting rotations will expand out to 4 starting pitchers. So let's go ahead and just give some overall takeaways from the wild card round. So in the wild card round, you had the Kansas City Royals sweep the Baltimore Orioles 2 games to nothing in what were low scoring games. In the battle of the young shortstops, Gunnar Henderson against Bobby Witt Jr., you had the young and upstart Detroit Tigers who sold at the deadline. They sold Jack Flaherty, their ace, at the deadline. They traded him to the Dodgers. And since then, where they were 8 games under 500, fourth place in the division, of course, ahead of the worst team in baseball history in the Chicago White Sox. They've gone on this run, and they find themselves ending the streak of 7 consecutive seasons appearing in at least the championship series for the Houston Astros, and maybe changing the entire outlook on how we view this Houston Astros franchise going forward with some of
Yeah.
the upcoming decisions that they're going to have to make going into free agency. But that's probably been the surprise so far of the wild card round is the Tigers and what they were able to pull off. Going into that house of horrors that is Minute Maid Park, believe me, I've been there before. Just like the resolve that it takes for a young team to go in there and beat a team that's been there, done that in every single way possible, unbelievable story. And then on the other side, the Padres pretty easily took care of the Braves. Pretty disappointing season for the Braves. I expected a lot more of them coming into this season, but obviously they had some injuries and Ronald Acuna Jr. going down. And then the Mets tonight. I mean, that's probably the new best game of the postseason so far, with
Yeah.
Pete Alonso coming to the plate, as I explained earlier, and hitting the biggest home run that's been hit by a New York Met since maybe this century. So
Yeah, maybe.
that's kind of the quick recap of what's happened. But based on all of that and kind of what you've seen, what would be your biggest storyline so far of the postseason? Is it
It's
the
got to be the
Tigers?
Tigers, man. It's got to be the Tigers. So every year there's a team that's just got the magic juice. Like, call it whatever you want. Call it Michael Jordan's secret stuff. Call it whatever. The Tigers have got it this year. Now, how far it takes them, who knows? But
Right.
for them to go into Houston and do what they did, I mean, just incredible stuff. Like, you kind of mentioned it in your text you sent me. Young teams that have no expectations, nothing to lose, kind of no, I guess, no self-doubt built up, no battle scars already
Right.
there.
Yep.
They just go out and play free, and that's really
Yep.
all you can hope for. If as a coach, that's where you want your team at, whether they've been there or not. Now, experience plays a big factor, but there's something about these young teams, man. It's crazy. It's crazy to see.
Yeah. I would have to agree with you there. And it extends beyond this stretch of 2 games where they beat the Houston Astros. It goes back to August 10th, where they had just sold at the trade deadline. They had bottomed out at 55 and 63, only to storm back with a young team whose payroll at $18 million, this lineup, is less than the yearly salary of the Astros closer in Josh Hader at $19 million. To hit that bases clearing double in the 9th inning, to go up by 3 runs, or in the bottom of the 8th inning, to go up by 3 runs and basically win that game. Holy cow. It's quite the story. Is this a team of destiny? We'll have to see. They go up against a very fundamentally sound Cleveland Guardians team that knows the Detroit Tigers. They're division rivals, obviously. But if you're the Tigers right now, you feel as confident as anybody because, as you mentioned, you don't have the battle scars. You don't have any self-doubt built up. If anything, you have more self-belief than potentially any other team in this postseason right now, aside from maybe the New York Mets, and what you can accomplish with Tariq Skubal, who is undoubtedly the Cy Young Award winner this year, and there's no argument against it. Winning the first pitching triple crown in the majors since 2011, leading baseball in both strikeouts and strikeouts and ERA, leading the American League in both. So yeah, it's the Tigers, no doubt. The other storylines that are obviously stand out from the wild card round are the Baltimore Orioles and the Houston Astros both getting swept because they both have, at least on the Astros side, a big decision coming up this offseason that they'll have to make, which will determine how they move forward into next year with Alex Bregman's free agency, with Kyle Tucker and Framber Valdez obviously going into free agency next year. You kind of have to pick your poison in terms of who you want to pay. Is it Kyle Tucker or is it Alex Bregman? And then from an Orioles perspective, like, you've rode this wave. You're a good baseball team. You've gotten yourselves out of the dumpster of Major League Baseball. You've developed all these players. Last year was your first run at it. You get swept out of the playoffs. Kind of understandable, right? But then to do it again this year, it feels just kind of disappointing the way that they ended the season. uh, losing the division to the Yankees and then only scoring one run. Like the lineup was supposed to be the strength of that team, and you only score one run in 2 games. Like it just feels kind of disappointing from an Orioles standpoint. Eventually, you're going to have to become a big boy and win a playoff game at the very least.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, oh man. I mean, you covered most of it, but I think the thing that I'm most worried about for the Orioles moving forward is just, are they going to get in their own heads now? Like we kind of saw the Twins were in that spot for a long. Wait, was it the Twins? Yeah, I think it was. There was a team in baseball that hadn't won a playoff game in like however many years. Was that the Twins? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, it was the Twins. It kind of, once it goes a decent amount of time, it kind of hangs over you. Like there's something about like history within an organization. Like even if you're a new player on a team, like the Clippers, for example, you go into that Clippers organization, you have to overcome their history in order to win a championship. You don't like, you're not just doing it for yourself at that point. Like
Right.
um, there's something to that. So that's really concerning for them. From the Astros perspective, like if you're somehow able to keep the team together, the core together, there's reason to believe you'll be right here back next year. It's just you got to be healthier during the regular seasons, I think, just to like have some, uh, just not momentum, but just consistency throughout the year. Like we kind of saw at the start of this year, they kind of started super slow. We kind of saw like, okay, yeah, like the offense isn't quite what we've seen from them, and then they turned it on. The pitching staff had a incredible month of July. I think it was a historic month of July. I think they gave up like 2 runs per game or something crazy like that. Um, and that, like having to rely on that level of pitching just isn't sustainable. And I think that's what did them in. I think it's just they got to score more.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and jump into each of these division series. They're all set. Do you want to start? Let's start with the Tigers and the Guardians, okay? It's the 6 seed Tigers going up against the 2 seed Guardians in the ALDS, best of 5. Emmy Nixon, what are you watching for in this series, and who are you picking to advance to the ALCS?
Well, first thing is that the Guardians won the season series 7-6. So these are
Yep.
two teams that throughout the season, even through the Tigers' ups and downs, I think the Tigers went into the trade deadline. I think it was like 4 or 5 games below 500. Even with all that, these two teams played deadlock baseball, essentially. So my take on it is I think there's something to having momentum. I think there is something to that. And who did the Guardians play in the wild card? I can't remember.
They had a bye.
Oh, it was they were the ones at the bye, right? Okay, so yeah, you know I think like kind of waiting on who you're going to play and kind of trying to stay fresh. That's almost a disadvantage in baseball. I think from a pitching standpoint, you can kind of stay loose, and the rest definitely helps from that standpoint. And of course, that's the strength of the Guardians team. But from a batting standpoint, it's hard to stay sharp. So I look at it. I think there's a chance the Tigers, with their hot run of baseball and kind of the momentum they're carrying right now, the confidence that they're bringing into this. I think they're going to kind of come out, win a game one, split on the road, and then from there, I think that's where you feel very confident if you're the Tigers. So to me, it's all about the Tigers coming out, winning at least one of those games on the road, and then from there, you can kind of be in the driver's seat at home because I feel very confident in their ability to win at home against this Guardians team. I don't see the Guardians as this like overpowering offense or anything like that. And the Tigers have shown, even against really good pitching that the Astros bring to the table, they can just score runs flat out.
The key for the Cleveland Guardians in this series is going to have to be get a lead early, get the game to your bullpen, which is undoubtedly the best bullpen in baseball right now, and let the bullpen do the rest. Cleveland posted the best bullpen ERA in baseball by a substantial margin. You got Emmanuel Clase, who's been the best closer in the majors this year, and he could become the next potential. If the Guardians make a run to the World Series and they potentially win the whole damn thing, which based on the wild card round, I don't know who's going to win the World Series this year. If that's any sign, like I think it's a pretty open playoffs that we're dealing with here. If they were to get there, though, he could potentially become the first reliever since Mariano Rivera to win a World Series MVP because he's that level of closer. But going back to my original point, it's going to be take a lead, get on base, take a lead early, and then let the bullpen take care of the rest. Hunter Gaddis, Tim Herron, Cade Smith, those guys will get you to Emmanuel Clase. They've done it all season long. The concern for the Guardians, actually for me, isn't offense. Obviously, you're going to face a tough pitcher in Tariq Skubal, who absolutely shut down the Astros eventually, right? You're probably going to have to face him twice if this series goes the distance, which is unfortunate. But, because he's unbelievable. If you haven't watched Tariq Skubal, you will get to watch him. He's a joy to watch from a pitching standpoint. But for the Guardians offensively, I think it just comes down to, like, outside of Jose Ramirez, outside of Steven Kwan, who's a great leadoff hitter, and outside of Josh Naylor, can they get production from anybody else? If they can get production from anybody else, take leads early, and hand the game to their bullpen, they will win this series. But if they don't do that, and they let the Tigers hang around, they let the Tigers take the lead, and they're not able to generate much against the Tigers, especially against Skubal, it could be one of those series where a hot team comes in there, they split the first two games, and then it's over in 4 because the Tigers carry over that energy to home, and they win the series. I think I'm right there with you. I think the Tigers, even though their lineup outside of Riley Green is a little barren, right? You're relying on a lot of names that aren't really known outside of Detroit. Outside of your Detroit Tigers fan, I don't know these names. Like, I'm still trying to learn. I don't think I can name 3 Tigers hitters right now, but that doesn't matter. If they continue to take care of business like this, if they continue to get on base, because one of the weaknesses actually of the Guardians has been their starting pitching. They lose Shane Bieber to Tommy John surgery. And then I believe McKenzie, their other starter, their number one, now that Bieber's out, has really struggled this year. So the starting pitching depth on the Guardians side is concerning a little bit. For the Tigers, it's a little dicey relying upon Tariq Skubal and then kind of a bunch of bullpen slash starter slash, like, it's kind of a dicey approach after Tariq Skubal, but their bullpen's been really good also, so give them credit for that. I'm going to take the Tigers to win this series in 4, though. I can't believe I'm saying that. I'll probably be wrong. Because I think if it gets back to a Game 5 in Cleveland, Cleveland would take the series. But I'm riding the wave. I'm riding the Detroit Tigers wave right now of momentum.
Yeah, I think I'll do the same thing, but I would even on your point on the Guardians, they're kind of keys. I would take it a step further. I'd say like you got to kind of step on their throats like early on in this series. Like if you can take a game one or game two, like by a wide margin, you can kind of start to make the Tigers doubt themselves, and then that's where your experience becomes an advantage. So, for lack of a better phrase, you got to kind of kill their confidence a bit. They're riding high. They're kind of, you know, riding the wave, like you said. Um, so you got to kind of kill that early on, or else this could get pretty dicey. So I'm gonna take the Tigers in four as well. Like I think. I don't feel great about it though. I think
I
there's a
don't
good
either.
chance this thing goes to 5 games, and if that is the case, um, I actually do think I would give the Tigers a shot at winning in Cleveland just because these teams are so familiar with each other. But um, it would be a coin flip at that point.
Yeah. We're gonna pick the rest, but breaking news: the Falcons have won in overtime, 36 to
Oh,
30. Kirk Cousins threw for a Falcons franchise record 509 yards tonight.
whoa!
509 yards for Kirk Cousins, and they win the game on a walk-off 45-yard touchdown. So,
Was it
definitely.
Bijan?
Huh?
Was
No.
it Bijan?
No. It
Ah,
looks like it was. I can't tell who it is. Number 12 for the
hmm.
Falcons. I don't know who that is. So I'll definitely have to
Maybe
rewatch.
it's. I think that's Mooney. I think that's Mooney.
Definitely have to rewatch that game later. But yes, it did go to overtime, tied at 30,
Wow.
and the Falcons end up winning. Okay,
Wow. I don't even
509
think Kirk
yards.
Cousins is rostered in our leagues, in our fantasy leagues. But beside the point. Yeah, go ahead.
509 yards for Kirk Cousins. That's why they paid
Ridiculous.
him. That's why they paid him.
Yeah.
All right. Uh, Yankees Royals. Here's what I'll say on this series. I'm a little bit surprised that it's Kansas City that we're facing. I thought it was definitely going to be Baltimore's. That was what I was expecting. I thought the Yankees are going to have to get through at least one of the two, Orioles or Astros, to get
Astros.
where they
Yeah,
want
they're both
to
out.
go to the World Series. So, what I will say, it is inexcusable if you're the Yankees this year not to get to the World Series. No excuses. Uh, it just is what it is, and it's no disrespect to the Royals, the Guardians, or the Tigers. But
The Tigers. Yeah.
you are the New York Yankees. You have not been to the World Series since 2009. You are on one of the longest droughts in franchise history. I think it's the second longest drought in franchise history, not getting to a World Series. You have won Soto, and I still feel pretty confident the Yankees are going to pony up and re-sign him, especially if he has a big October. But there's no 100% guarantee on the dot that you are going to be able to re-sign him. So this is the window. This is the year. Garrett Cole has an opt out after this season, but again, there's a caveat there. The Yankees can prevent that opt out by adding another year to his contract, so they can kind of like it's complicated, but a lot of decisions to make in the offseason. This is the perfect time. No excuses for New York. Now, what has to happen for the Yankees to win this series? Well, uh, you're going to have to get production from the bottom of the lineup. Meaning, you're going to have. I feel pretty confident that Judge and Soto are going to do what they do to a certain extent. Gleyber Torres has been fantastic the second half of this season. Austin Wells has been really good as well. Even though he's slumped lately, I feel pretty good that he's going to have a good series. But outside of those four guys, we need a Jazz Chisholm and his base running. We need Anthony Volpe to really step up. We're going to need one of these other guys to get going. Because if we can get the bottom of the lineup clipping and turn it over to Soto and Judge with guys on base, that's where this team really becomes dangerous. And then you need Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon to step on it this series. Like, we need Garrett Cole to do what he's done the past couple times the Yankees have been in the postseason, and we need Carlos Rodon to show us why we paid him the 6-year contract. He was very good this season, a lot better than last year, but we need him to pitch well. It's pretty simple.
Got to get length out of your starters.
Length out of the starters, because the Yankees bullpen, while it's been much better over the past 2 months-ish to finish the season, as we've taken Clay Holmes out of the starter role, and we found guys like Luke Weaver and Tim Hill, who've been very reliable back there, you want to get length out of the starters because you don't want to have to expend your bullpen early on in this series. And I think just winning games in Yankee Stadium is important. And then from a Royals standpoint, it's all about the starting pitching. The starting pitching with Cole Reagans and Seth Lugo, like, those guys have been fantastic for Kansas City here lately. They were great once again in Baltimore holding that lineup down. Can they do it again to this Yankees lineup? And what is their approach for pitching to Juan Soto and Aaron Judge in key situations? Here's how I kind of lay it out for everybody. Lineup for lineup, I give the edge to New York. Starting rotation, I actually give the edge slightly to Kansas City. Bullpen, I think it's a push. I think you can go either way. But I'm picking, obviously, the Yankees to win the series in 4 games. They have to win.
Okay.
They have to win it. Or bombs will be going up in the Bronx. Seriously.
Yeah, the riots that will commence if the Yankees lose are just going to, they're going to be generational. But here's the deal. I think from the outside looking in, as a non-Yankees fan, as the non-Yankees fan on this podcast, my take on it is just this team looks focused. Like, their star power, like, their stars, not star power, their stars are, I think, gonna come in ready to go this time around. Like, from Aaron Judge standpoint, I know his track record in playoff time hasn't been the greatest. It's not been horrible, but it hasn't been, what we expect from Aaron Judge. But here's the thing too, is he hasn't been in the playoffs in 2 years, and he's a different player than what we saw all those years ago when he was, like years ago in those times where they were playing the Astros, he was a guy that was, due for a strikeout here and there. He doesn't do that anymore. He's way more disciplined at the plate. He's just way better at just getting contact. And just way more complete of a hitter. Yep. And I think that's why I think he's going to control his series. And then Soto, his reputation in the playoffs speaks for itself. He's one of the best playoff performers of this generation. So I'm taking the Yankees on those two guys alone.
My question is, if Juan Soto, or here's my statement. Here's my hot take. If Juan Soto has the kind of October that takes him from getting $500 million this offseason to $600 million this offseason, the Yankees will win the World Series. That's my
Yeah.
prediction. That's my hot take. And you can kind of
Yeah.
envision what that would look like. That would just be. It would just mean like Juan Soto being one of the greatest young stars in baseball history is the catalyst that drives everything for this postseason run for the Yankees. Because he was the piece. He was the piece that he was the final puzzle piece to this Yankees
Yeah.
team to get us over the top, and hopefully that happens. At least get us to the World Series, please. Because if not, as I mentioned, I pray for the Bronx. All right,
Yeah. The Bronx Bombers are going to be Bronx bombed on.
the Bronx will be bombed
That was corny. Yeah, that
definitely.
was corny.
Uh, and I would have if I were Brian Cashman, I would have the what's it called?
Secret
The
Service.
Secret Service guarding your house. But that's just me. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the National League really fast. Dodgers, Padres. What's your feeling on this?
Um. Well. Well. First of all, I mean, I really hope, just for baseball's sake, that this series just lives up to all of the hype. Like, this is the series of this round. Like, no question about it. This is the series.
Yep.
Um, all the star power. You have Manny Machado on the Padres side, kind of having a not a renaissance season because he hasn't been bad in recent years, but like last year, I think he kind of had a down year by his standards, and he's really gotten hot lately. Tatis has been really good, and then you have like the moves they made at the deadline that have kind of really gotten this thing rolling. So it's kind of the hot team from the deadline versus the hot team from the offseason, if so to speak.
Yeah.
Like the Dodgers made all the moves in the offseason. The Padres made their moves to get to this point at the deadline. Now I think the Dodgers being so shorthanded in their pitching staff right now is
Yep.
it's such an interesting conversation because you know you still have aces there. It's just whether or not you're going to get length out of them against a lineup as good as the Padres.
Yeah.
You're bound to get got here or there. So it's like,
Yeah.
is there really, you know, is there really going to be enough, from the pitching on this Dodgers team, even with the lineup that they have that they put out there? So I'm kind of leaning Padres here. I'm expecting Otani to bring it. Obviously, first playoff series. I
Yep.
think he's going to put up numbers. I think he's going to, play like Shohei Otani, to be honest. But
Yep.
I don't know if it'll be enough. I think it's going to be a high scoring series, a lot of fireworks. But I like this Padres pitching staff a little more.
Okay. Fair enough. I think if you want the storybook, one of the storybook endings that we could possibly get to this postseason, it's going to be Shohei Otani playing in his first postseason, and it's going to be the Dodgers stars taking over, in my opinion. Freddie Freeman, who seems to have the style of hitting that works well in October, right? It's the right combination.
Is Freeman's ankle okay, by the way? I heard he turned it.
I think it'll be all right. Discipline, contact, power. Like, he's a 285 hitter in the postseason with an OPS over 900. And he got a hit in all 6 games for the Braves in that World Series back in 2021, the World Series that they won, right? and then Mookie Betts. Like Ohtani and Mookie Betts are going to be in the spotlight in this series, because everyone talks about the number of injuries to the Dodgers starting rotation, right? And that being alarming. The rotation was a concern last year, but in contrast to popular belief, I don't actually believe that was the reason they lost that series to the Diamondbacks. I think the reason was Stars didn't produce. They did not score enough runs. And you have to give credit to the Diamondbacks rotation and what they did in that series. Like the pitching for the Diamondbacks was fantastic, but Betts, 2 for 25 were the last two postseasons. Bad.
Wow.
Just not good. Freddie Freeman, 1 for 10 last year. That was the reason the Dodgers lost last year. It wasn't because they were shorthanded on pitching. It was because their stars did not produce when it mattered the most. Now, hopefully, adding Shohei Ohtani is the magic elixir that solves all that, right? And if Ohtani, Freeman, and Mookie Betts all live up to their potential, all play to the back of their baseball cards this postseason, the Dodgers might not lose a game in the playoffs. But there's a question there. Shohei Ohtani, as great as he is, has never been in the postseason. Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman really struggled last year against good pitching. And Michael King, the pitchers that the Padres have, like, if they don't hit, then it's up in the air. I believe, though, that they will hit. I believe that this series will go 5 games. It'll be kind of a bite your fingernails kind of series for the Dodgers. Like, you don't want to get knocked out of the playoffs at first sight 3 out of the last 4 years. Because people still talk about
spending $1 billion in the offseason, you damn sure don't want to.
Well, but people still talk about how that Dodgers 2020 World Series is kind of a, I don't want to call it a Mickey Mouse World Series because that's not fair, but it was a shortened season. It was a season where there were no fans, and like you can make up all these different reasons for why that's not a championship that should be celebrated to the extent of like an 162 game full on postseason having to win all these games. I don't necessarily partake in that argument, but that's what a lot of fans still remember is like, okay, you won the World Series, but you did it in these weird circumstances. Can you do it in normal baseball circumstances? And so, look, the Dodgers are going to have a tougher path, well, at least on paper, to get there, and you still have like the entirety of this Ohtani contract, like the next half decade to win a couple. But it'd be nice to do it this year. I'm gonna go the opposite way for this one. I'm gonna say Dodgers do it in 5. I believe that their stars will produce enough, but I can see it either way.
Okay.
Last series, Phillies
Mets. Go
Mets.
through this one pretty quickly because it's getting late here.
Yeah, Phillies Mets. What do you think?
Ooh, I have a weird feeling about this one. And that's not because I'm like so low on Philly or anything, but I do think the Mets have something real going here. Like it's not a fluke. Now, the thing is, the Phillies have the capability to just turn any game into an absolute rout in a single inning, with the power that they have in their lineup, and with just the nuclearness. That's not a word, but fuck, you know what I'm trying to say. The nuclear thing that they have just as a lineup, just they go nuclear. And there's no other way to describe it. It's in my head. So as much as I kind of want to pick a close series, I can't really do that because the Phillies have just been so good throughout the entire season. They've been so consistent. They felt like a team on a mission from start to finish. And I
Yeah.
know like there was like a month and a half period after the All-Star break where they were like kind of 500-ish baseball, but I mean, with how they started the season, that middle portion of the season, that like potato, like that's nothing baseball. Like you really want to get hot right now is my point, and that's kind of where they're at, and they know that they're a team that's built for the playoffs. They're not built for July baseball. They're built for October baseball. So I'm picking the Phillies. I'm taking them. I'm going to say they finish it in 3 games. I'm going to say they sweep.
Okay. I'm going Phillies as well. I'm going to give the Mets one game,
Okay. Yeah.
but
Fair.
when you look at the Mets, it's been a fantastic run. And you could probably say at this point, they've achieved as much or maybe even overachieved to this point in what they've accomplished. Like making the playoffs and actually advancing around for the first time since 2015 is a massive success for their franchise.
Yeah.
At one point this season, it looked like it was going a totally different direction, but then the fight in this team, the heart in this team has been absolutely incredible. And Francisco Lindor, in any other normal universe where aliens like Shohei Ohtani don't exist, he would easily win the MVP. And they've gotten contributions from Starling Marte, Francisco Alvarez, their catcher. Like Brandon Nimmo's been good. So the Mets are a good team. And
Yeah.
for them, it's all going to depend on how long can their starting rotation go against this Phillies lineup. How much length can they get out of that starting rotation, in my opinion. But I think from a Phillies standpoint, I think the Phillies have the best starting rotation in baseball, top to bottom. You look at what it is with Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, Ranger Suarez, and Christopher Sanchez, who's a 27-year-old left-hander who has been fantastic this season. Like, I think top to bottom, those four guys are built to win any series. I think they give the Phillies a great chance at winning this whole thing with the explosivity of that lineup. Why you should root for them if you're just a baseball fan with no particular rooting interest in any of these teams? Bryce Harper. The guy is just polarizing. He's a stud. He's the kind of player baseball needs. He's a great, great player, a future Hall of Famer. And when things go right with Bryce Harper, it's beautiful to watch. And he has excellent career postseason numbers. But the one knock on him, just like a lot of these stars in baseball, Aaron Judge, Shohei Ohtani, like some of these guys, they're stuck on 0 rings.
Mike Trout. Yeah.
They don't have a ring on their finger. I think this could be the year that the Phillies do that. So I'm going to take the Phillies to win. I think the Mets are a little worn out. I think that's going to show a little bit in this series. They had to play the doubleheader just to get themselves into the playoffs on Monday.
Yeah.
Then they had to go 3 games, 3 days consecutively, use all their pitching. I just think eventually they're going to run out of gas a little bit. But I do see them winning a game on the back of a New York crowd in a home game. But I think the Phillies will win. Last thing I'll say, this will be my parting shot. I think one of the reasons, if you want the good for the game, if you just want the good for the game, right? Take any team bias you have out of it. One of the reasons the Yankees need to make the World Series is because any World Series matchup that you can get with the Yankees there is absolutely fascinating and fantastic. You could get Yankees Dodgers. Imagine that. That speaks for itself. Yankees Phillies. That would also be fascinating. It would be a rematch of the 2009 World Series. Yankees Padres, the Juan Soto trade World Series. Who won that trade? You could play it out on the field. Uh, and then you could get a Subway Series, Battle of the New York teams. All four outcomes are absolutely fantastic, and they're all big markets. It'd be great for baseball. So take all your bias out of it. It just doesn't feel the same. Like Tigers, Phillies, Guardians, Dodgers. It just doesn't do the same thing for baseball. If baseball wants to compete with football season at all, it has to be Yankees Dodgers. It has to be Yankees whoever for them to even have a chance of going toe to toe with NFL college football. It's just simple.
That's really all there is to it. But my parting shot, and just give me your short answer for this. I don't want to keep going too long, but what the fuck happened to Edwin Diaz? Like, I don't like. He sucks now. Like, what happened?
He doesn't suck. He just, with closers like that, if they can't control the zone, then you start walking people. And once you start walking people, and you can't find the zone, things just spiral downwards.
Yeah.
When he has his best stuff and he is finding the zone, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. But you know, he he had a rough go at it. I think it was yesterday, or I think in that game that the Mets clinched. But he took care of business tonight. So we'll see what happens with him. Obviously, it's going to be a interesting matchup against that Phillies lineup to see what he does. But that's going to do it for tonight's episode. I know we went a little long. Didn't really expect to go 35 minutes on the Steelers-Cowboys game, but that's what happens when you get two fans of each team together talking about it. Short-term and long-term future. That conversation went a little longer than I thought. But we got it all done. We will be back Sunday night after the game with Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. On that episode, we'll be explaining some of the minor tweaks that we're making over the course of the next month or two as we start to get closer to 2025 and closing out 2024. And then we'll continue on our normal Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday schedule with an NFL episode on Tuesday where we will actually recap Steelers Cowboys amongst other things. So make sure you check out our power rankings episode that we recorded on Tuesday. And then I'll be uploading our Dit Hole from yesterday here very soon. So everything should be up on our channel. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. And I'll let Emmy sign us off.
All right, y'all. Until next time, keep it raw, keep it real. Peace out.
Peace.
I'm going to make that a thing. I don't know how y'all feel about that, but peace.